Hey educators, today we're going to talk about assessing learners.
Yes, and so let's talk about formative assessments. Those are those assessments that are used to monitor students' learning throughout the unit, throughout the weekly lesson plan, throughout the three-part lesson. Then you have summative assessments, which are used to evaluate students' learning at the end of the unit plan or at the end of the weekly lesson plan. I am Miss B, a ninth grade English teacher,
And I'm Miss G, a 10th grade social studies teacher.
and this is Teacher Life, a toolbox of tips and tricks for educators.
And so as we're measuring learning, we're checking for understanding of the content, and we're checking to see how well students are doing as we move forward through the school year. And, one of the biggest questions for students, for teachers, for parents, is are students learning the curriculum, knowledge, and skills being taught? And that's where assessment comes in. And so there are two types of assessments. There are formative assessments and there are summative assessments. And so formative are more short-term assessments, right? We do them daily sometimes, weekly. And so we're just checking as we're moving forward with students, like quick checks to see if students are progressing as we're delivering content. And so you're providing information for the learner themselves, and for the teacher. And for teachers, it's very important that we get feedback, because if we see that a student is not gaining information, then we have to take that data and sort of reteach students. And so formative assessments are little checks so that we're tracking student learning as we're moving forward.
And then the other type of assessment, summative ones. And that's really where you're going to do the full gamut of assessing a student's knowledge. Usually we do these at the end of a particular unit of study. And so you want to make sure it's cumulative. You might include all the things or a little bit of each thing that was taught along the way to see what your scholars have maintained or retained during that unit of study. And the goal is to make sure that when you're giving that summative assessment, you are evaluating what they should have learned over time.
Okay, so let's look at some examples of what a formative assessment might look like. And so on a daily basis, as we're doing these lesson activities that we talked about in a prior video when we talked about instructional strategies, any assignment that you're giving a student or a learner, you are assessing. I mean, definitely they're gaining content, but then you're sort of assessing if they're getting the material. So a formative assessment could take place in group work. If you've given them some group work, you can look to see how they're progressing. If you're giving a mini lecture, you can ask questions during discussion as you're moving forward to see if students have gained, content, prior content, or content from the mini lecture. You can give weekly quizzes, you can have like quick writes. Sometimes at the end of class, I give a 1-minute quick write on the lesson. So I'll say, give me a 1-minute quick write on whatever our question it was for the day. If we had to say, describe, Mayan society, they'll give me a quick write, and then I will look to see what they know about Mayan society. So again, these are small, quick examples to assess if students are progressing and learning the content.
Can I add something here
Yes,
from
ma'am.
English? What we've been
Absolutely.
doing, thank you. What we've been doing lately is doing a formative weekly assessment. So
Mm.
we'll have all of our content delivered Monday through Friday. And then the following Monday, we do a 5-question quiz just to see who needs to be retaught the information, the skill, the content from the previous week. And one way we've been wording our questions, kind of like your quick write, what can you tell us about? And then we'll insert whatever the topic is, versus asking a direct question. So that allows our scholars to give the information that they have. And then we can evaluate, me and my co-teacher, if that particular student knows enough about that topic from the week before. And so that's been working really well. And then we do the reteaching in our tutorial sessions on Tuesdays.
Nice.
All right, so the next area is summative. Unit, midterm, or final exam. A writing essay, so we just did a research unit. And the actual summative assessment was the 5-paragraph essay where they gave us some information about their topic. And so we'll read through those and evaluate, did they learn all the skills, all the content that was taught over the last 3 weeks?
Okay. And in social studies, we definitely do unit exams and final exams. And there are times, I have an AP course, so they take an AP exam. So instead of giving them 2 exams at the end of the year, I might give them a project, usually associated with where they're going, so they're going to US history. And I might find something like maybe the Columbian Exchange or something I know they'll cover in US.
Mm-hmm.
And then I might give them a project to work towards. So they prefer those performance projects or research projects to, as opposed to having 2 exams around the same time.
That's a great idea.
Okay, so I just wanted to give you an example, educators, of what a formative assessment might look like as it's tied to our instructional standards. And so here we see a social studies standards that says, describe the diverse characteristics of societies in Central and South America. And some of these substandards require that students are able to explain something or compare and contrast. And I love these skills. And because I find sometimes that students might know the content, if they see a video or if they see, if we do some sort of group reading together, but it won't transfer to in an assessment if they don't know, well, what is it do you mean when you say explain? Or how do I compare and contrast? And so for me, I might give a reading assignment or a discussion, and it'll call for the student to describe or explain. And then if I'm grading an assignment and I don't see that they've gotten that or they don't have the ability to do, then I will have a little lecture on what does it mean to describe? What does it mean to explain? And I do the same thing with compare and contrast as we go more into skills. And again, you're using these instructional strategy type lessons in class using the content. And then when I look at their graphic organizer that I might give them, looking to see if they can compare and contrast. And if they cannot do it, then I know that I'm reteaching that skill. So this happens on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, where I'm looking at these activities and I'm saying, okay, this person got it, this person didn't get it, and so these are some formative assessments through, lesson activities that I might work with during the week with students.
Awesome. All right, so for the English example, I kept it very short. We have our standard. We're going to cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. So this is a repeating standard from the first day of the semester to the last day of the semester. And so we tend to we chunk it, or we deconstruct it. And so August, we might teach scholars the RACE, or race strategy, to cite strong and thorough textual evidence. We will teach them during that race writing activity how to color code. And so every time they cite a piece of evidence, they're going to put that particular piece of evidence in green. That's the color I've chosen. And then they have to support some sort of analysis of what the text says explicitly. Well, that's just responding to a writing prompt. And so maybe in September, we work on how to understand a writing prompt so that you can get to that analysis part. And that's usually the E in RACE. So RACE stands for restate and answer the writing prompt question, cite the evidence from the text, and then explain. And so you get that analysis of what the text says when students are explaining themselves or explaining the cited evidence. And then another lesson is how to actually make inferences, which is another skill that we work on throughout the semester. And so that summative piece would usually be a 5-paragraph essay. We give them a writing prompt, and then they use that race strategy near the end of the semester, going through all of those different parts: citing, explaining, which is the analysis, drawing some inferences as well from a text of literature that we'll give them, and then answering the questions or the different parts of the writing prompt, and then produce that 5-paragraph essay.
The reason I am smiling, number one, is because, I'm not smiling for you on this standard. Because I'm looking at the standard and I'm seeing 3 of our information processing skills.
Yes.
I'm seeing citing evidence, I'm seeing analysis, and I'm also seeing drawing inferences, which are separate skills that we have to teach. So just to have them all in this one standard could only be expressed in a summative assessment. And something real cute that made me laugh was that as I was teaching SAQs, short answer questions for the AP exams, to one of my AP students, I said, "Are you familiar with the ACE, which is answer, cite, explain?" And they're like, "No, we're familiar with the RACE, restate."
Yeah.
So they must have come out of your course.
But what's so interesting is that the 10th grade teachers, they leave race behind and then they enter ACE. So depending on who their 10th grade teacher might have been, they would know ACE versus race. And and then sometimes we throw an S. You got to summarize at the end or conclude that piece of writing. And so I'm laughing because remember last week's video, I was saying we don't have a list of skills. We have to pull the skills out, but they're there. You can see
in there.
Right there.
Absolutely correct.
And that's the importance of deconstructing the standard. So you can see all the different things that my scholars would need to learn throughout the semester from that one standard.
Agreed. And as we know, educators, students need these skills moving forward, as they go into their work life and their adult life, and they need to have these 21st century skills. And it's really essential, just as educators, even though we're teaching knowledge and content, we are also teaching skills. So hopefully you'll join us next week as we talk about teaching skills in the classroom.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was saying I'm looking at this list and I'm loving the one for perseverance, because that's one that we definitely need to reiterate with our scholars.
Yes, absolutely. But I think, and you know what, that is so true as you say it. But I wonder if it comes from living in a society now where we get everything immediately. you know, and so maybe kids are not, they don't think about long-term, you know, the long-term benefits of what they're doing, but maybe the everything now society. I never thought of that.
Yeah. So I have this thing where I'll go and work with a student, maybe in a small group or one on one, and you can see the defeat. And I'm like, you can't give up. You got to persevere through this. You know what you know. I need you to know that you know it. So let's try
Yeah.
it again. And so instead of the writing part, we might just talk it out. And they're like, oh, I do know. I said, okay, well, do you think you can go back to your seat and actually show me in writing? And with that little bit of conversation, they're usually able to go back, sit down, kind of gather themselves, because many times they're very emotional about this, not getting it right the first time. And
Mm,
I let them know, hey, it takes several attempts at these skills to master them. And so usually I'll go back and are able to work it out in writing form versus being able to just articulate it orally.
wow. I never thought about what my favorites were, but definitely as I'm looking at them now, I do a lot of problem solving and a lot of critical thinking
Mhm.
skills. As I go back and forth with students, especially when they have issues, we go back and forth. They ask me a question, I ask them a question. Well, what do you
Mhm.
think you'll do about it? You know, and I try to push their thinking forward. And one of my beta students said that I reminded them of like the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. She says, "You don't answer questions. You just ask us another question." And I said, "I'm trying to get people to problem solve, you know, and think past the situation and think forward." So that's interesting.
So I'm looking forward to next week's 21st Century Skills conversation.
So am I. So educators, if you like this video, if you like our content, please make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you'll be aware when we release our next video.
Yes, and we would love to know, what are some of your favorite formative assessments and your go-to summative assessments? Put those two things in the comment section below.
Thank you for joining us, teachers, and enjoy your teacher life.
Bye-bye.